All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Bryce Kuhn, and I am the Director of Education with EarthDay.org. And it is my pleasure to be with you here today with our amazing panelists and to start the first webinar in the series of Connecting People, Planet, and Prosperity, a webinar series for Earth Week 2025. So happy Earth Day, everyone. So we have today, we're going to be talking generally about Earth Day and mobilizing action, but just a reminder that this is a week-long event and we have webinars each day. So tomorrow, if you're interested, we'll be focused on education and biodiversity, the intersection of those two subjects. And then on Thursday will be the intersection of health and biodiversity. And then lastly, this Friday will be climate, cities, and biodiversity. So please consider joining us for the additional webinars. Before we get started today, let me go over a few Zoom guidelines for you. So if you're having any issues with your audio, please check on the bottom and go to the audio settings and see if that solves any issues you're having. The chat, that is only, the chat is going to be for the participants and the host. So it's not for everyone who is in the webinar. If you have questions as we go, please use the question and answer function. The panelists will be able to see that, and you can put the questions in at any time during the webinar. So we're going to do question and answer at the end of the webinar, but if you find that you have a question for the second speaker, feel free to put that question in the Q&A at that moment, and then we can come back to your question during Q&A, so you don't have to remember it the whole time. For those who are hearing impaired, there is a closed caption option at the bottom of the toolbar. And today's webinar will be presented in English. However, language services in English and French will be available on the recording of this. And you are welcome to ask questions in English and French, either language. Before we get started, we're going to do a quick land acknowledgement. So contributing partners of this webinar series work and reside coast to coast in Canada, as well as the United States. And we wish to acknowledge our presence on the traditional territories of the Indigenous people who have called this land home since time immemorial. We are committed to working together in the spirit of collaboration, reconciliation, and change. Today, I will be your host, and I will be sharing briefly some background on Earth Day, and then we will move to our amazing panelists. We have Valerie Malmo, who is the Executive Director with Earth Day Canada, Charlotte Germain Aubry, Project Management Officer at the Convention on Biological Diversity, and last but not least, Sean Southey, the CEO of Canadian Wildlife Federation, and the chair of IUCN's Commission on Education and Communication. So the first webinar here, we're on Earth Day itself. I hope everyone's been having a great Earth Day so far, and it's great to see everyone's posts that you're probably seeing on LinkedIn. And let's frame this conversation with a quick history of Earth Day itself. So today we are celebrating the 55th anniversary of Earth Day, the first Earth Day being in 1970. And so, before this time, people aren't necessarily thinking of the environment in the way we do today. Sometimes people even called pollution as the smell of prosperity, a sign that, production was occurring. And it wasn't, 1962 when Rachel Carson published Silent Spring that there's this real public awareness and attention around living organisms, the environment, and starting to create this link between pollution and public health. In 1969, the junior senator from Wisconsin, Senator Gaylord Nelson, was concerned with the deteriorating environment in the United States, and along with many others, witnessed the Santa Barbara oil spill in January 1969, which was just a very sad and dramatic display of the impact we were having on our land and species. And there was an idea to use the momentum that had been gathered around people protesting the war, the anti-war movement that was occurring in the late 60s, around teach-ins in college campuses. So the first Earth Day, if we go all the way back, has these roots in education, which, as the director of education for earthday.org, is something that I really like, that it goes all the way back to the inception. Senator Gaylord Nelson partnered with a conservation-minded Republican congressman to serve as his co-chair on this project. And then they worked with a young activist, Dennis Hayes, who tapped into this idea of teach-ins for the public. And to achieve this goal, had 85 staff throughout the nation. And within the United States, 20 million Americans participated in the first Earth Day. So that's 10% of the population at the time, which is just, an outstanding turnout. And since Earth Day 1970, Earth Day has grown into an international movement, with people recognizing it everywhere and taking individual actions to celebrate our planet, to protect our planet, to clean our planet. So one thing that we all do together, like I said, maybe you're seeing on your LinkedIn today or whatever social media platforms you use, is keeping Earth Day alive. It's something that needs to, be given attention and watered, so it continues to be this global event, and we can grow and reach as many people as possible. One of the ways we do that at earthday.org is by developing a theme for each year and activating people around that theme. So this year's theme is Our Power, Our Planet. And I really like this slogan because if you think about it, a lot of it is around renewable energy, our power. But then we also think about the people and the power that we have as individuals to make change and to impact our environment. I would like to talk a little bit about what we're doing at earthday.org around education and climate education. As I mentioned earlier, going back to the first Earth Day, being rooted in education, it is still such an important part to activate youth around protecting the environment and addressing the climate crisis. So when we develop materials, we have this lens of really 3 reasons why we believe it's so important to have climate education in schools all around the world. The first being climate well-being. If you are in schools or you work with young people or have children, you're probably very aware of the climate anxiety that young people are feeling today. And as much as it might seem like the easiest option would be to just avoid the topic, that certainly is not what we should do. We need to address it, and addressing it in schools, there's evidence that decreases people's anxiety around the topic. And that makes sense, because if you think about the information that young people are receiving, it's information from social media. It might not all be fact-based. It might not all be age-appropriate. So by incorporating it into schools, we can ensure that those things are true. We also developed the term green muscle memory. So if you think of muscle memory, something you do without thinking about it, I think about, for muscle memory, when I put my seatbelt on. I put my seatbelt on every time I drive my car, and I don't really think about the reason why I'm doing this. I just put my seatbelt on. And that's the kind of muscle memory we want to have, and have it be green or environmental friendly behaviors. So you get to the point where you're bringing your reusable water bottle with you everywhere, and it's just something that you do, not necessarily something you have to think about each and every time. And then lastly, we want young people to be thinking of climate solutions. We want people to be aware of what these green jobs are. The green economy is growing so fast, and there's huge gaps, hiring gaps in these fields. So ensuring that young people are aware of those opportunities, interested in those opportunities, and can innovate solutions. So on a global scale, we do this through encouraging climate education to be included in the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, which are a component of the Paris Climate Agreement. So this is countries saying what they're going to do to decrease their carbon emissions and tackle the climate crisis. And we believe that education is a critical part of that. In the past few months, many countries have updated their NDCs, and many more will do so in the next coming months. And it's encouraging so far that many of them have included added education as one of their responses. We're also activating youth through something called the Earth Day Showcase, which is materials that we sent to teachers around the world to develop projects with their students around topics such as plastics, fast fashion, renewable energy, or food prints. And in addition to learning more about these topics, the classroom or the school or the community or all three work together to have a culminating project around that topic that is their showcase. And schools all around the world, as I said, are taking part in this, and then they're sending us the pictures, and we are going to highlight them after Earth Day. So if you're interested in seeing how young people are activating on this Earth Day, please consider coming back, checking out our Earth Day materials, and seeing what these students have done. I've seen some of what these schools are working on, and it's some very impressive work, and I'm really excited to get the photos to share with everyone. So we have Earth Day all the way back to 1970, 20 million people participating. By the 1990s, this is an international global event. An estimated billion people were reached by Earth Day 2010. 2020, Earth Day turned 50 years old. And 2025 and beyond, together we write the future. And that is what we are doing today with this webinar, with our panelists, with the webinar this week. So thank you again for joining us. And let's hear from our first panelist, Valerie Malamo, the Executive Director at Earth Day Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. I'm going to be doing the French part of this presentation since we are in Canada. Je vais faire cette partie de la présentation en français, mais je prends des questions en anglais aussi. I can take questions in English after when we do the Q&A. So feel free to jot those down, and hopefully you'll find our stuff engaging enough. You can also find a lot of what I'm going to say on our website. I'm just going to share my screen. Je vais partager mon écran pour rendre cette session interactive et un peu plus intéressante. Donc, voilà, le Jour de la Terre Canada est un organisme, tout comme earthday.org, qui œuvre à faire connaître le Jour de la Terre et le célébrer, encourager, mobiliser les gens, mais dans un territoire spécifique, qui est le territoire canadien. Je travaille pour un organisme qui existe maintenant depuis 30 ans. Donc, quand Bryce parle que depuis 1990, il y a une vraie mobilisation internationale, notre organisme fait partie de cette mobilisation internationale. On a commencé au Québec comme organisme et en 2020, lors de la pandémie, nous sommes devenus un organisme national et notre mouvement, on espère, va s'étendre dans d'autres provinces. Nous avons principalement nos employés ici au Québec, mais ça fait quelques années qu'on tend à développer des actions un peu partout au Canada. On fait plusieurs choses là, dans notre organisation, mais comme c'est le Jour de la Terre aujourd'hui, je vais prendre un moment pour vous parler de la campagne qui se déroule présentement au Canada avec quelques images rapides pour vous familiariser avec ce qu'on fait pour célébrer le Jour de la Terre cette année. Donc, voilà. Donc, à l'écran, vous voyez une image qui est en fait le visuel moteur de notre campagne cette année, qui est centrée sur la biodiversité. On a choisi de prendre une approche ludique qui rejoint, j'espère, les jeunes et les aînés et tout ce qui est entre les deux pour sensibiliser sur l'importance de la biodiversité. Dans nos recherches, on découvre que beaucoup de Canadiennes et de Canadiens ne savent pas c'est quoi fondamentalement la biodiversité. On sait qu'il y a de la nature, mais on n'est pas capable d'expliquer c'est quoi de la biodiversité. Et on ne connaît pas les raisons pourquoi c'est important de la protéger, quelles sont les choses qui causent son déclin et certainement quelles sont toutes les richesses que nous apporte cette biodiversité. Donc, à travers une campagne ludique qui est un géant cherche-et-trouve qui est digital, mais aussi sur des surfaces imprimées, on amène les gens à chercher 10 espèces emblématiques du Canada qui sont présentement vulnérables ou menacées. Et c'est un jeu interactif. Donc, ils peuvent aller en ligne et essayer de chercher ces espèces-là. On a différents visuels que vous pouvez apercevoir, soit dans les villes de Montréal, Toronto ou Vancouver, qui sont des grandes affiches imprimées où on voit la carte interactive avec les images qu'on peut chercher dans le dessin. On peut aussi scanner un code QR et aller sur la version électronique. Cette campagne média vit beaucoup sur le monde digital aussi. On a des panneaux publicitaires, des babillards, on a des posters qui circulent. Certaines écoles en ont reçu et on a une vidéo qui tourne présentement. Ce vidéo, en fait, c'est une façon, on espère, d'attirer les gens vers la plateforme en ligne. La carte se joue sur un téléphone cellulaire, mais beaucoup de gens peuvent le faire sur notre landing page, qui est une page web, où est-ce qu'il y a plus de place pour parcourir la grande carte et trouver les espèces. On a imbriqué un calculateur de temps. Vous avez 3 minutes pour trouver les 10 espèces. Et au bout de 2 minutes, les espèces commencent à disparaître et ne sont plus trouvables. Donc, c'est un message assez clair qu'il faut agir pour protéger la biodiversité. On a aussi prévu des pop-up. À chaque fois qu'on trouve une espèce, il y a une pause dans le temps qui est écoulé pour permettre de lire quelques informations sur chacune de ces espèces-là. Quelles sont-elles? Pourquoi elles tendent à être menacées? Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour préserver leur habitat et s'assurer qu'elles survivent? Ça se veut aussi l'occasion aussi d'aller plus loin. Dans notre site web, vous allez trouver également des informations dans 3 capsules vidéo pour expliquer fondamentalement qu'est-ce que c'est la biodiversité, qu'est-ce qui affecte, qu'est-ce qui cause son déclin et quelles sont les valeurs importantes de la biodiversité. Donc, quels sont tous les services écosystémiques qu'on reçoit qui sont absolument nécessaires avec la biodiversité. Donc, c'est vraiment une approche qui est vulgarisée par des vulgarisateurs scientifiques. On s'adresse ici à une campagne grand public où est-ce qu'on essaie de sensibiliser des gens qui connaissent très peu et qui peuvent s'initier un peu à ça. Également, dans le cadre de cette campagne-là, notre organisme mise beaucoup sur la contribution des municipalités. Au Jour de la Terre Canada, on souhaite mobiliser le plus possible de municipalités parce qu'on croit que les villes sont vraiment des acteurs de premier plan pour adresser les grands défis des problèmes environnementaux. Ils sont proches de la population, ils sont responsables de la gestion de matières résiduelles, ils sont responsables de la mobilité souvent dans leur ville, ils ont la responsabilité de gérer le territoire et donc les impacts sur la conservation, notamment la biodiversité, sont très, très importants pour nommer quelques items qui sont vraiment de leur ressort. Donc, ils sont des partenaires importants pour nous. Et à chaque année, pour mobiliser les municipalités à s'engager pour le Jour de la Terre et pour l'environnement, nous choisissons un porte-parole à chaque année qui change d'une petite ou une grande ville, de l'Atlantique, du Québec, de l'Ontario ou de l'Ouest, qui va être mis en valeur puis qui va partager comment eux contribuent à lutter contre les changements climatiques et qu'est-ce qu'ils font pour protéger la biodiversité. Cette année, nous avons choisi le maire de Pelham. Pelham est une petite ville en Ontario, dans le coin de Niagara. Et une des raisons pourquoi on a retenu M. Pelham, c'était parce que cette ville s'est mobilisée pour protéger une espèce de bouleau et une espèce de truite en valorisant vraiment le territoire puis en protégeant son habitat. Donc, c'est un bel exemple. Et on sert de cette personne et de l'effet de la mobilisation de la ville pour inspirer d'autres municipalités à en faire autant. Également, dans notre mandat, on veut vraiment mobiliser les gens à créer des événements, des activités. Et comme le dit le Jour de la Terre, c'est un événement qui n'est pas juste le ressort d'un organisme, mais c'est tous les efforts que tous les gens mettent pour le souligner, le célébrer. Il y a énormément d'événements partout au Canada. Il y a 400, 500 événements qui sont organisés, de ceux que nous, on connaît, qu'on peut mettre sur notre calendrier, mais qui sont organisés par des villes, des organismes qui veulent amener la population à prendre soit une action concrète ou à apprendre quelque chose ou s'impliquer dans une action environnementale. Donc, si vous allez sur le site web de earthday.ca, sur jourlaterre.ca, vous allez découvrir un calendrier où vous allez pouvoir choisir par la ville, par le type d'événement, quelque chose qui se passe en avril autour du Jour de la Terre. Donc, il n'y a pas un manque d'événements, mais il y en a de plus en plus qui s'ajoutent et notre équipe cherche à toujours surveiller en vigie qu'est-ce qui s'offre et l'ajouter au calendrier. Mais tout le monde peut soumettre une activité pour permettre à tout le monde de voir à une place tout ce qui se fait, en fait, de mobilisation citoyenne et organisationnelle autour de cette grande célébration. Nous avons également nous-mêmes organisé dans notre ville de Montréal, où nous avons nos bureaux, 3 événements. Ce matin, il y avait une cinquantaine de personnes qui ont fait une grande fresque de la biodiversité à la biosphère, avec une belle vue sur Montréal. Ils ont pris 3 heures pour apprendre les fondements de la biodiversité. À l'heure du lunch, on avait 2 webinaires, un en anglais et un en français, d'1 heure pour aider à comprendre c'est quoi la base de la biodiversité. Et cet après-midi, il y a une centaine de personnes qui sont dans des petits groupes accompagnés par des amis de la montagne qui s'en vont explorer le Mont-Royal avec un nouveau regard. Ils s'en vont apprendre sur la biodiversité unique du Mont-Royal. Qu'est-ce qui sont les pressions? Que font les gens de la montagne pour protéger cette biodiversité-là? Et comment ces citoyens-là peuvent s'impliquer s'ils souhaitent contribuer à sa préservation? Donc, ça vous donne un petit aperçu de ce que fait notre organisme pour souligner le Jour de la Terre. Et sur ce, je vais passer la parole à notre prochain invité.
All right. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you so much for that overview. And I really appreciated going through looking at the work that your organization has been doing, your use of media, introducing people to the importance of biodiversity and the effect that it's having. And I think this is a great segue transition to our next speaker, Charlotte Germain Aubry, Project Management Officer at the Convention on Biological Diversity, who will dive a little bit deeper. And as I said in the introduction here, the very first Earth Day teach-ins, there's this very important part about learning. And I think that we'll probably learn some stuff from Charlotte today on biodiversity. And over to Charlotte. Thank you. Charlotte, I think we might have an issue with your mic, unless that's just me.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Oh,
Yes.
apologies. Yeah, so let me share my screen now. Wonderful. Hi, so my name is Charlotte Germain Aubry. I'm a program officer at the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So we're taking several kilometers steps back, and we're going to go from the local, which Valerie presented so well, to the global. So we're working globally with all countries who are parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is all the countries in the world but 2. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this very new adventure we're embarking on, which is called the Cali Fund. And just to tell you, the Secretariat is based here in Montreal in Canada. We're very proud to have our Secretariat and our headquarters here in Canada. So what is the, I'll change my slides. Sorry. Here we go. So the Convention on Biological Diversity is an international convention of the United Nations that has 3 objectives: the conservation of biodiversity, the sustainable use of its components, and the 3rd objective is the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the use of this biodiversity. So when people get benefits from using it, they should be sharing back to biodiversity and to its conservation. Basically, that's the idea. The way that things have been working here is it's a balance between if you access biodiversity and if you use it and you get benefits, then you share back, and this sharing should be put to good use for the conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity. And that's the big idea, basically. It's not a very new idea. It's been around for a long time, as long as the convention has been around. It's one of the Rio Conventions, so it's not new. But its implementation has been a little bit on the back burner compared to big activities around the conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use, etc. And one of the things that has been happening until now, and is very common, not only in biodiversity, if you think about humanitarian assistance or climate change activities, etc., is that a lot of it needs a lot of money, right? And the way that it's being done so far is that you have countries which have benefited and are able to benefit from biodiversity. Think about, North America, Europe, developed countries in general, basically. And they give money from their government money, and they distribute it to the global South, developing countries, countries with economies in transition, for them to enable them to sort of try and catch up with the conservation and with the ability to use biodiversity sustainably and to create their own benefits from it. This model has some limitations to it. I think that's not a new idea either. And so with the Cali Fund, we're trying to do things differently. So what is digital sequence information? So the Cali Fund is the Cali Fund for the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits that come from the use of digital sequence information, not necessarily of physical samples of biodiversity. So the term is a little bit vague. It doesn't have an internationally agreed definition, but basically is the basic building blocks of life. So think about DNA, but all the information that's associated with it. What is this gene? What is it used for, etc. And when you think about synthetic biology, for example, this data is used all the time by many, many. Here's an example. I think it tells to everybody. This is the example of the COVID vaccine. So you take a bunch of sequences. Here we have 5, but really it's millions. And then you understand their functions, and you create an artificial sequence, and you put that in a vaccine. You put that into humans, and it helps you fight against that particular disease. And this is the type of research that is very publicized, but there's a lot of research. A lot of scientists use millions of data every day. And this data is freely available so far. So in 2022, there was a COP15. And for the Montreal residents, I think you might still remember that it happened here. And it shut down a couple of metro stations downtown. I think it was a big bother to a lot of citizens of this city. So for this, we apologize. But a lot of good came out of this COP, the COP15 on biodiversity. So one of the things that the parties, so all the countries agreed to, was that the benefits from the use of that data from nature should be shared fairly and equitably. So it should come back and be used for biodiversity conservation in some way or another. They also agreed that the way it should be shared back is through a multilateral mechanism. So everybody participates, everybody who benefits participates, no matter where they are in the world, and everybody who needs support for the conservation of their biodiversity gets to benefit, basically. This includes a global fund, so somewhere where money can go and be distributed back. Also, I think the massive item in 2022 was the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is basically a global framework for all countries and all governments to be able to support biodiversity and set targets and try and reach those targets by 2030. So the decision, fast forward to 2024, the next COP, the COP16, was thankfully not in Montreal, but in Cali in Colombia. And there was a big decision that was taken on DSI. This decision basically says that large companies, so the really big ones, who profit from the use of data from nature should be the ones contributing monetary benefits, so give some money into this global fund, which is now known as the Cali Fund, because it was adopted in Cali. So think about pharmaceutical companies, nutraceuticals, cosmetics, plant and animal breeding, biotechnology, but also laboratory equipment or AI models and softwares that actually analyze all this data and make humongous amounts of profit for some of those sectors. So they should go back and contribute to the Cali Fund. So here is a sort of very large view of this whole ecosystem, from biodiversity to sequence to usage and to benefit sharing. So let's zoom a little bit just on once the data is the data is in the database. So your turtle or your tree or whichever organism or your bacteria is sequenced and the data is available in a database. So you have a lot of researchers who use this for many, many different purposes, including research for conservation of biodiversity. And these should share some non-monetary benefits. So they should share the knowledge, their know-how. They should train people from maybe countries that don't have that capacity, etc. But let's focus on the Cali Fund and the commercial users who make money out of the products that they commercialize from this research. They put an amount of money, which is also in the decision, into the Cali Fund. And once this Cali Fund has received annual contributions, the money is distributed back. So in a very innovative decision, 50% minimum of this money should go to indigenous people and local communities. These are the custodians of biodiversity. They contribute to the conservation of biodiversity in a disproportionate manner to the number of people they are, on the planet. And so their self-identified needs should get some funding from this fund. So we just want them to keep living the lifestyle that they want, the traditional lifestyle, if they choose to, and support that so that they can keep conserving biodiversity and safeguarding their lands. The remaining funds go to governments in developing countries and economies in transition, basically to support the targets that they have set for their country. Part of that fund might be allocated to scientific capacity building to build that capacity for countries with less scientific capacity to be able to train them around the use of this data and how to basically benefit from it. So it's a very ambitious program here that hopefully the Cali Fund will have a lot of money in. It's brand new now, so there's not much in it. There's a lot of discussions with companies and with governments to encourage those companies to contribute. But this is basically the grand vision. And it's a very ambitious one and quite groundbreaking. When it was adopted, there was a lot of press around it. It was a big win for biodiversity, reminding that the Cali Fund is not a charity. This is not whoever has the heart to give money to biodiversity will do this. This is a payment for the use that comes from nature, the data that comes from nature. It is not free. It might be freely accessible, but it doesn't mean it's free for nature to actually give that data. So it was a big moment. Basically, it was adopted, typical to a big UN decision at 7:30 in the morning after three nights and days of nonstop negotiations. I think everybody was deliriously happy with exhaustion more than anything else. And I will finish my presentation with this video, which is launched today. It was launched on social media a couple of hours ago. And that basically explains, hopefully in a good way, what the Cali Fund is. So let me launch this. And hopefully everybody can see and hear.
DSI is digital sequence information on genetic resources. It's basically the data that comes from the sequencing of organisms from nature, biodiversity, and some of the data that's attached to it, such as explaining what this sequence does. This is the first time that parties have agreed to sharing the benefits that come from the use of data from nature, and in our case, DSI. They agreed to the operationalization of a multilateral mechanism, including a global fund, now known as the Cali Fund. Companies should contribute for several reasons. One is that they directly benefit from data which is currently freely accessible and should stay freely accessible as the parties decided so that everybody can benefit from it. The fact that they make a commercial benefit from the use of this data means that they should share back part of their benefits to support the efforts to conserve biodiversity. I think in terms of marketing, corporate social responsibility, it is very important for the consumer to be able to see that the company they choose to buy from makes the right choices and does contribute to the Cali Fund. Now we're setting up marketing tools, we're setting up a steering committee, the entire governance system, we're setting up a secretariat to support the steering committee, to support the parties of the CBD for this fund to be successful.
So this is the video, and I will end on this, and I'm happy to take questions in English or in French, either. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for taking something that was complex and making it very digestible to the audience here. I learned a lot from that, and I'm sure that the audience did as well. So thank you. Just a quick reminder, as Charlotte said, the questions. If you have any questions for previous panelists, something that is on your mind now, feel free to put that in the Q&A section. At this point, we're going to answer questions at the end, but you don't have to wait until then to put it in the Q&A. And then last, I'd like to, last panelist, hand it over to Sean Southey, the CEO of Canadian Wildlife Federation and the chair of IUCN's Commission on Education and Communication. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Bryce. It's wonderful to be here. A special thank you to Charlotte and Valerie. I believe that Earth Day is so special because it has many different voices, many different angles. It's a chance for all of us to learn and to engage. Happy to be part of the series. I'll remind you that Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday this week, there will be 3 more webinars, and they go into more specific issue-based talking. Tomorrow, for example, is a topic dear to my heart, the topic of education and conservation, education and biodiversity. So do keep joining this series. 55 years ago, 20 million people got together for the first Earth Day. That sounds like a big number, 20 million people. This was before there was an internet. It's before we were so connected. I did a quick look in anticipation of this talk online, and it is anticipated that over 1 billion people will participate with you today around the world to celebrate Earth Day. And for me, that's a huge number. 1 billion people, over 20,000 organizations, all getting together to turn up our voice, to turn up our volume, to ensure that our planet is protected. And for me, I love the theme, our planet. No, our power, our planet, because it reminds us that protection of the planet is in our hands. It is something that we are in charge of. So as you're here, imagine the 1 billion people all around you also celebrating, making noise, sometimes with detail and long negotiations, the 20-year journey that Charlotte and the CBD and governments went on to create this new financial mechanism, and the beautiful array of micro projects and initiatives and schools and churches and mosques all working today around the planet and around Canada for conservation. As Bryce said to you, I have 2 big roles, which allow me to really engage in conservation and environmental work in a very special way. I am the CEO of the Canadian Wildlife Federation, and I am, in that spirit, I get to work with an amazing team working across Canada to conserve Canada's most endangered species, its most special species, and the places they live. But what I like about our organization and the way we operate, even though we're about Canadian Wildlife Federation, we know that involves people. So our strategic plan, as it calls for protection of animals and landscapes, it also calls for a culture of conservation, calls for creating a conservation ethic. And I think that's why we're so excited to be part of Earth Day, because Earth Day is where we create that ethic, where we share that ethic, where we get outside with our colleagues, where we share our passion and our commitment to this beautiful planet. We also work a lot on education at the Canadian Wildlife Federation. We have one of the biggest conservation education programs across Canada, working to make sure that every Canadian has the program they need. Whether you're a pregnant mother, when you're just coming out of university, whether you want to plant a garden, whether you want to protect monarchs, or if you're retiring in an old age home and you want to pass on your wisdom to a young person. We have those different programs and we work with an array of partners. I love that the whole concept of this webinar series is partnership. doing this with Earth Day Canada, Earth Day International, with Montreal University and different departments of the university, with an array of committed groups. And we hope as we build this series year after year, we will get more and more partners involved. I want to touch on two things which really are important to me in my other role at the Commission on Education and Communication. And that's about how we make change. And I think it's really important as we go into Earth Day to be aware that the reason we're here is to learn, is to share, is to show our commitment, but it's equally about understanding how change happens and what we can do in our own space, whether it's one person, a dozen people, whether you have access to 1,000 people or 1,000,000. There's so much we can do. And I want to talk about this power of action, this power of connection, this power of love. We at the IUCN Commission on Education recognize that when people are connected to nature, when they love nature, they do everything different. They vote different, they shop different, they raise their children in different ways, and they take different jobs. Next week, Canada will vote. I hope all of you will vote for nature. And it turns out that when we look at this power of connection, this power of love, it's not random. It turns out that most of us fall in love with nature when we are young, when we're doing something, when we are with someone we trust, like a parent or a grandparent or someone from school, with our peers and colleagues, in repeated exposure to nature in a healthy and wondrous way. I want you to think about that. That means that you, in your work, can change other people's lives just by getting them outside into experiences in nature. We have been building this movement of different groups around the world, just like Earth Day's been building to their 20,000 partners. We only have 600 partners in our Nature for All movement. That's what we call it, Nature for All. But those 600 groups are sharing best practices, sharing what works in their communities so other people can learn and do that work. I want to share with you two stories. One story from Colombia in South America. In Colombia, a whole bunch of grandmothers realized that the largely urbanized environment they lived in, their grandchildren did not understand nature like they did when they were young. So these grandmothers got together and created a small NGO called Outdoor Grannies. And the Outdoor Grannies educated themselves, became aware of the local biodiversity, and started taking their grandchildren outside every week. First 2 or 3 grandmothers, then 10 or 20 grandmothers. And then, of course, the grandfathers went, that looks so fun, we want to get involved. So that started spilling over into grandfathers. Simple, elegant, and we know it works. Grandparents and children have a very special relationship. Being out in nature with someone you trust in that repeated way, very important. And just being able to see the wonder of nature is a powerful thing. The other story I want to tell is Learn to Camp. This is a Canadian experience. As us Canadians know, we have many newcomers to Canada every year. Depending on the year, somewhere between 500,000 and 1.2 million people move to Canada to live. Some go home, but many of them stay here. That's 500,000 to 1.2 million every year. Everyone knows that Canada is beautiful. Many of them love and are coming to Canada because it's beautiful, but nature can also be scary, especially our parks that have bears and mosquitoes and coyotes and wolves and all these things, which if you hear about them can be a little terrifying. So Parks Canada created a program called Learn to Camp, where they bring new immigrants into a nice controlled environment like a school auditorium, teach them to camp, put up the tent, put up the mosquito sprays, learn to make a fire, cook food on the fire. and then help them transition out into nature. If you want to learn more about different ways you can do it, or you want to share different ways you can do it, I encourage you to go and look at natureforall.global, natureforall.global, and learn more about the way different groups are sharing this work. Outdoor grannies. Someone's asked me a question. Gloria's asked a question. Can we write the name for outdoor grannies? Colombia in South America, outdoor granny. We will, when we circulate the minutes from this note, I'll make sure that link is with you. I want to close by talking just for a second about the other thing at beyond just the connection to nature and the love of nature that we really passionately care about at the CBD and in IUCN and in CWF, and many of you may be in this space, and that's the issue of education. If you want to create a culture of conservation, if you want people to engage, you've really got to think about, is nature in our education system? And are people being educated in nature? So we have been promoting and exploring a concept of nature-based education. We have a task force going on right now with over 150 members and 40 organizations, really looking at how can we promote the education regime we all need to ensure that every student and every teacher has the access to the learning and the understanding and the mentoring and the playgrounds and the gardens and the forests near them so they can be in nature with nature as they learn. You think deeply, we are all nature, and nature is many things. It is curriculum, it is the learning space, it is material for classes, it is a teacher. And if we look deeply at nature and deeply at education, I think we can see a way of expanding our perspective on nature that realizes we're an intricate part of a complex web. And that complex web is something we can impact and change. And again, it allows you to explore what you think is important. What's really smart is if you look at the definition of education, it's not what we only think as formal, what happens in the class. Education is also non-formal. That's the clubs and the school trips and the scouts and the guides and all of those clubs that are semi-formal, but not in schools. But it's also informal. It's those outdoor granny trips. It's those learn to camp. It's those when you take your child or your parents out for a walk. It's when you share on social media the stuff that you care about. It's all of us gathered here. So I want you to think about how you can promote this concept of nature-based education in a way that allows us to leapfrog and really create a culture globally of conservation. And we're not alone. Last year at the Convention on Biological Diversities, which is when all the world's governments meet every 2 years to set the priorities for global change to protect nature, they agreed and they declared, and there's now a mandate, the world will create a global plan of action on education for biodiversity. And that process is underway. Led by the CBD, where Charlotte works, but in partnership with IPBES, with Gibbon, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and in partnership with UNESCO. They are putting together a suite of partners to drive the deepest thinking ever on a new way of approaching education at scale. And I want you to all watch that, engage with that, because imagine a world where every student, every club, every family, every dinner party, every news channel had something on environment and inspired us and connected us to nature and made it clear what we could do to contribute. So as I close my talk, I encourage you to stay involved. Come to the next series here. If you're interested in a community of educators and communicators, please join the Commission on Education and Communication. It's a global free community of over 2,000 people around the world. You just have to Google IUCN, join a commission, and you can be part of a community that cares like you for the way we educate and communicate. If you are in Canada, even if you're not in Canada, it's an exciting week because on Friday, we will be launching the City Nature Challenge using a platform I love, iNaturalist. Different cities around the world will be seeing what biodiversity they have and challenging other areas, other regions, other cities to say, to share, what do we have? What's beautiful? What's unique? What's endangered? What's invasive? And what can we do about it? Over 36 cities and regions in Canada will be participating, and my dear colleague, James Paget, will be sharing more about this in Friday's webinar. So I invite you to come back this week and be part of our work. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Sean. As always, feel very inspired after listening to you. I want to go grab some people and take them outside right now, which is a good way to feel on Earth Day. And yeah, I'll plug as well as a member of IUCN's Commission on Education and Communications. It's something that you can go online and join, and it's free, and great resources there as well. Thank you again, Sean. Okay, so if all panelists could please come back, we're going to go ahead, and I have at least one question or two for each panelist. And to the audience, if you have any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will we'd love to answer your questions. Charlotte, I'd like to start with you. Someone asked about, how do we encourage companies to who make a profit off of this data to contribute to the fund? Is there any way to hold them accountable, or what is that process?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. It's a very interesting one. It's one that we've been working on for a long time here. And I see that the question actually talks about, like, since this data is freely available, like, how do you get anybody to pay anything? And this was a question that the parties have discussed a long time. There was the option of this mechanism to actually be a mechanism to make this data, to put this data behind paywalls. But the conclusion was that basically it would not penalize the big cosmetic companies or big pharmaceutical companies. It would penalize the small researchers in developing countries trying to do some research with very little means. And it's not easy always to distinguish one from the other. There's a lot of gray area between the big company and the individual researcher in some low capacity country. So the idea was more like, let's get to the point where money is actually made and benefit is proven with sales and revenue and profit, etc., and get put the expectation on companies to pay. Decisions from the CBD COP are not legally binding. It's not a treaty. It's not a protocol. There's no rule in court to actually impose this. So there's a whole mechanism that's being put in place now, because clearly this is the big challenge. And we have governments who have decided, they have committed to do this. There is a line in the decision that says that governments are expected to put incentives in place for the companies to contribute to this. And governments are discussing what they can do. They're talking to their companies, they're setting up expectations, and they're also currently organizing, so hasn't happened yet because it's too early, some big, sort of high level events where companies can go and all the media is there and they can come and pledge and say, okay, I am this big company, I contribute to the Cali Fund, this is why, and sort of use this for their own image. And as this builds on, this will become something that consumers would expect, the companies they buy from to actually have, contributed to. We're thinking about a logo, things like this. The other side of a little bit more of the stick of aspect of this story is that some governments, so there's like 30-something countries that actually have legislation in place saying if you use genetic data that comes from a sample from my country, you have to come and ask me before you can use it, and we have to agree to some type of contract of what benefits you're going to share. Now, if you think about companies that download millions and millions of items of data per day, this is an incredibly arduous task. It's actually technically impossible, we've been told, even with blockchains and all this. And it becomes very technical very quickly. But basically, the idea is also for those countries to have committed to the Cali Fund to say, okay, if you have contributed to the Cali Fund, we're not going to go after you with our legislation. But if you have not, then we have legislation in place where we can go and demand sharing of benefits. And if you're a company that uses data from basically all countries, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you need to negotiate hundreds of contracts every time you have a new research project going on. So there's a lot of layers to this. It's not straightforward. It's not easy. There's a lot of push and pull of a bit from everywhere and everyone. But give it a little time, and I think this is definitely something that's going to become something that you consumers hopefully hear about. When you buy a product. So, thank you.
Charlotte, I would like to ask a follow-up to that, and perhaps you haven't gotten to this stage of it yet, but talking about consumers and thinking about what products they buy, and it brings me back to something that's come up a lot today, which is education. And it's a complex topic. Have you all discussed kind of educating the general public on this, or educating consumers so that when they potentially see a logo, they know what that means? Or am I kind of ahead of where you're at?
Yeah, you're a little bit ahead now. I
Yeah.
think we're trying to educate governments, we're trying to educate companies right now, we're trying to educate Indigenous people in local communities who can demand, to actually get the funds from this Cali Fund and say why they need it and put pressure on their own local governments, etc. So we're still a little bit in that sort of high level. We're not yet on the logo on your deodorant or your medicine or your makeup, but hopefully we get to that, and we have plans, we have budgets to hire companies to actually set this up, etc. Yeah, this was adopted last November. The fund was signed by UN partners in February, and it's now April, so we haven't had time to really catch our breath yet. So right now we're talking to the parties directly concerned with paying or putting incentives into place. This is the stage we're at right now, just starting. But this kind of webinar and talking to the general public is a great opportunity for us to start spreading the word on this idea that those who use data have to go give it back to nature.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Valerie, I'd like to turn to you and ask you, one of the things that both of our organizations do is center Earth Day around a theme. So it's something that I think a lot, but I'm curious from your perspective, why is it important to have a theme? Your process of thinking why to have a theme. How do you determine what theme to have each year? If you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. I think one of the key things about a theme is that if it's a specific subject, you have particular partners that are going to want to amplify the message, that are going to engage with you in some capacity. We like to make something actionable. So, in this particular case, biodiversity, we wanted to work with the CWF to really layer the BioBlitz as an anchor activity, because what we want at Earth Day Canada is to have people actually take action on Earth Day, getting involved in something concrete, because this is, as to your point, Sean, the more you connect and do things, the more you actually care and you want to continue down this process, right? And I like your reference to the green muscle, right? That automated reaction where it becomes natural. So it has to be done through action. So we're always trying to look for something that's actionable, and there's certain things that are big themes that are hard to action. We tried to find something that's fairly actionable and some people that might be able to carry that action. So in the case of biodiversity, doing BioBlitzes was a great fit. using the iNaturalist application, engaging people that are going to be able to do that action is what we leveraged. And we work with a lot of different corporate partners that want to do employee activations. So we organized a shitload of BioBlitzes. We'll be doing some in May and June with other corporate partners. So, you know, we're trying to find something that people can really do very directly on or around Earth Day, so that it can actually be a sort of like a, you know, turning on the light and engaging in a way that's going to carry forward throughout the year, because it should be Earth Day every day, not just on April 22, but we're looking for something specific that we can action. And we're also looking for something that can really get specific partners engaged, because having a very broad message sometimes makes it everything to everybody. So this is a new thing that we're doing. We used to be very general, and now we're trying to do a more specific theme every year. And we try to pick something that maybe has less attention, needs a bit more focus. We were all very impressed with the COP15 impact, but we also know that was a big moment in Canada. It was a surprise event because we weren't planning on hosting this thing at the beginning, but turned out to be a shining moment for our country. But it's not something that was carried by necessarily the entire population. It was a very select group of people who were engaged in that conference of parties. So we're trying to, you know, see how much we can scale it. And we know that there's a lot of organizations that work in biodiversity conservation. As a general organization, Earth Day is not a specialist, but we want to make sure that we are supporting organizations that also are really active in that space. We think Earth Day's as an event or movement is something that should be federating everybody into action. And there are specialists, right? There's organizations that are specialists in their field, that are key at working on plastics, or working on waste, or working on protection, conservation, or, you know, EV engagement, whatever theme that you're on. Some people have a real high specialty. Earth Day is really there to, I think, generate some sort of federated effort and really promote the people who are specialists, which is why we like to find specific organizations that then become partners of the campaign, that are going to carry with their expertise, you know, that specific theme. So how we pick it, we ask members, we ask, you know, our team gets together, we try to brainstorm about what we should do. We try to also be very focused on what's the current mood in the population, what's the current beat, what's certainly an emerging topic that might need some help for promoting. So there's lots of the things that are contributing to what we use as a theme. But yeah, I think it's sort of like an organic thing that sort of grows, and we take a couple of months through the summer to sort of think through that. But we're always open to suggestions. If somebody's right, says, hey, you should be doing something else, we'll be listening for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I think I don't know if it says directly, but you know, it also builds like a sense of community, right? Like, you know, by having everyone coming together around the same topic.
Yeah, I
You
noticed
know,
this year it's quite good. There's a lot of people who do things, not necessarily use our exact campaign media stuff, but they will certainly jump on the train, right? So we're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of people say, oh, everything that the cities published was around biodiversity. Lots of different people that jumped on the biodiversity message. They may have given it their own spin, which is absolutely what we want, right? We want them to just own the theme and articulate it in a way that's meaningful for them. But I really see that having a very focused theme helps garner a lot more focus, and that's good. I think everything else is excellent, and lots of people will continue to talk about other things about the environment during the month of April and during Earth Day, but I think having a central theme actually focuses a bit of our attention and helps us elevate everybody's knowledge on a specific issue, especially one that's maybe misunderstood or not well comprehended. So
yeah, for sure. Actually, Valerie, if I could ask you a quick follow-up question that will then transition into the question I have for Sean next. Valerie, I'm curious, just in terms of activating people, you know, we talked about in the context of a theme, but just generally activating the population. Are there any lessons that you've learned over time? I mean, you know, when Sean was referencing the first Earth Day, 20 million people, no internet. I mean, things have really changed, and in some ways it's gotten a lot easier to activate people, but in other ways,
not.
it's not. So do you have any lessons that you could share with the audience?
It's still riveting to me to think that 10% of the population sat in and you know, on that first Earth Day, and it's something that will always be impressive, especially today. I remember the 500,000 people that rallied in Montreal in 2019, and we like to see that kind of public spark happen again, but we seem to be living in a digital world now.
Yeah.
And the more it's digital, the less we're coming together physically, right? We're coming together digitally, but not physically. So you have to find ways to make people engage digitally, which is why we're doing this gamification thing this year to try to get people to engage. But I miss this. I really would love if people came out more and got together more. I think the pandemic hurt quite a bit in creating, isolating people and finding another way of connecting. I think we need to go back to that. I hope that we could go back to that, having more physical presence and more, because it was quite impressive. The vibe that comes out of a gathering like that is substantial in moving mountains, right? I think you feel the energy when there's a big group of people. So right now we're trying to find things that people can collectively action, but it's more and more difficult in digital world, I have to say. So we're
Yeah.
I'm very visible, but it's much less. What I find difficult is sometimes it's less engaging, right? Because
Yeah.
it's very quick, it's very fast paced, it's a lot of publications. You're trying to keep that momentum going with a lot of visibility, but it's not the same level of engagement as somebody going in and doing something, which is why the activities are so important. So we believe there's going to be activities happening, there's going to be people actually continuing to care about the event and organize something. This will draw people back in, and people engage physically in tree planting or cleanups or activities that are actually real gatherings where they actually express some sort of form of care for the planet. And I think we have to keep mobilizing different organizations, cities, organizations, corporations, to actually bring people together and do something more than talk about it, actually do it.
Yeah, great. And yeah, that's a kind of experience that I've seen as well. I think back in the United States, at least, about 9, 10 years ago, we had some really large events with 1 million people. And it was almost like proving that the internet can bring together large groups of people. And then it's like, all right, we did that, right? And
Yeah.
then and now it doesn't seem to happen as often. And I agree with what you're saying about that energy. However, luckily, one of the times that I think people do feel a lot of energy around the environment is on Earth Day, Earth Week, Earth Month, however you're celebrating it. And Sean, one of the things I love about your background is, communications and education. I hadn't seen that intersection before prior to IUCN. And I was like, that's interesting that they're paired. But then you see that, communications and education are essentially, that's what you're doing. You're communicating information to people. So Sean, I'm curious if you could talk with that communications background about, why do you think Earth Day has been such a successful movement? Why has it, continued over this time where other things might come and go? And then how do we continue to grow that?
It's a great question. It's a question I think a lot about. How do you build movements? Not build a campaign that lasts a year, not build I'm going to get Valerie on a bike program and the very tailored program. Charlotte's going to have shorter showers. Valerie's going to drive a bike. How do you create something that changes your very ethic, your very way you look at the world? And I think Earth Day did a whole bunch of things that are, in fact, incredibly strategic. And like most movements, probably did some of them by mistake. First of all, an important part of any movement is a zeitgeist moment. It's a social moment when people need to speak up. And that 55 years ago, this was the first of the public declarations of care, coming out of Silent Springs, coming out of the beginning of emerging crisis in the midst of an anticipated losing ozone and acid rain. It was a complex time, and people stood up and spoke. And so there's a zeitgeist dimension. I would say that same dimension exists for Black Lives Matter, for same-sex marriage, for Me Too. These are comparable movements in my mind that have succeeded based on a number of ingredients. Second ingredient is a nice, big, broad umbrella. Just like Me Too is simple and profound, Earth Day is simple and profound. And that really great ideas have that unique dimension. They make you think and they make you ponder. And I love the fact that people go, well, Earth Day is just a day, but Earth Day is not just a day. Earth Day, we talk about it for a week, we talk it for a month. Valerie's full-time job, your full-time job, Bryce, is feeding this movement, keeping this energy going. And so I believe Earth Day is evergreen, will keep going, but also is a 365 event that engages us. I'm going to pick up what Valerie said. It's a broad umbrella that allows for very tailored actions of the 20,000 different partners and the billion different people get involved. When we look at same-sex marriage or we look at Me Too, those each had different actions that could be done, but they're yours in your community. Someone in Beijing working in a local school may act very differently than one in Wisconsin or in Perth. So I think that umbrella that allows for you to do it your way is what makes a movement. We find alignment and we find support and we find community, but we can do what we think is right under the big umbrella of we care. And I think that's a really critical dimension. I also think movements need feeding and chaperones and Sherpas, and earthday.canada, earthday.org. Those are our chaperones and our Sherpas. They keep it going, they keep feeding it, and each of us that support beautiful organizations like Earth Day Canada and Earth Day are helping keep things moving. We often underestimate how important it is to have someone behind the scenes creating the architecture and the systems and structures and the noise and the brand that make each of our work happy for those billion people doing something today. So a special thank you on this day to Valerie, to Bryce, and to your full teams for all the magic you do in keeping this going.
Thanks.
Lastly, I'll just say a good movement and going forward, it adjusts with the times and it adapts to the times and it stays modern and contemporary by being able to respond to new crises. And the fact that there's themes and those themes are adaptable, it means each of us are guiding and shifting the future of it, whether it's through social, whether it's through field events, whether it's through gatherings at schools. These are all different ways we can keep it, I like to think of evergreen. You can use it again and again, but use it differently every single time. It's like that regifting that gifts forever. And so I think we all owe a special thank you to those creators 55, 56 years ago who started dreaming of bringing us together to celebrate.
Thank you for that, Sean. That's a really interesting perspective. Okay, so the last thing here real quick is hopefully you can all see the upcoming webinars. We have tomorrow, we have education and biodiversity. Then we have health and biodiversity, climate cities and biodiversity, and then that repeats there. So yeah, we have a repeat there. But we have more webinars coming up the rest of the week. And here's a quick thank you to our partners. As you can see, as Sean mentioned, you know how many people have been brought in on this, which is just fantastic. So many partners. So thank you for everyone joining us today. We appreciate your time and we wish you a very happy Earth Day. And thanks again to the panelists for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.